Hello, 1111 Unified family. Welcome. Today, I am so honored to be speaking with Sheva Carr and Robert Browning. They are part of the HeartMath Healthcare program as well as HeartAmbassadors. And so I would love for each of them to take some time to introduce themselves a little bit further. Who are you being in the world? What are you up to? Please share.
I'll kick it off. This is Robert.
Sure.
I've been with HeartMath for a quarter of a century. And honestly, as it relates to 1111, 27 years ago, I had a moment where I found exquisite hope and potential on what a moment of love could do in terms of creation, in terms of healing, and in terms of helping the world. And I didn't know HeartMath at the time, nor had I met Sheva yet, but my heart came very alive intuitively that there was something about the heart, there was something about love or the core heart qualities or the emotions of the heart that could really help advance evolution, but also connection, but most importantly, healing on all levels. And very rapidly, with a very tenacious focus, I first met Sheva, and 3 months later, I bumped into HeartMath, and it's been my life ever since. And we can unpeel a little bit about that.
Yeah.
Well, what stands out to me, Anistara, thank you so much for having us here in the conversation with all of you, is the unified aspect of your brand. Because several of my grandparents came to North America fleeing violent conflict. It was embedded in my ancestral trauma. And then when I was 7 years old, my best friend was murdered in gun violence. And so a lifelong inquiry of my own was an intrinsic sense from a very young age that we were all one. And yet, why are we so violent and separate? And trying to reconcile that polarity in a young mind and heart caused desperate despair and depression and anxiety for me throughout my childhood and into my adolescent years, where I found myself an aid worker in the middle of a different violent conflict. And so I was seeking unifying principles, whether it was on the battlefield saving orphan children in wars, or in my passion for theoretical physics and the search for a unified field theory that would unite all these different physics theories. And when I landed, thanks to this guy, at HeartMath's doorstep in 1995 as a young graduate student, medical school student, to say, it's my spring break and I'm here to volunteer. And they said, we don't take volunteers. And I said, can't you now? And a few days later, I got a phone call from the woman who to this day is still the director of HR at HeartMath. We have very low turnover here because we have a lot of job satisfaction. And she said, I have a form for you to fill out. So she invited me over to fill out this form. And the job that she gave me that first spring break that I was up at HeartMath volunteering was to transcribe their research. And in sitting in this little room with headphones on, typing and reading a book that I think is now out of print on the back of a pickup truck on my brakes by Sarah Pattison, who's now the president, actually Sarah Childer, the president of the HeartMath Institute, called The Hidden Power of the Heart. It was like every page I felt like a cookie monster eating cookies. Because there it was, the science of unification. And not just the idealism that we're one, or the idealism that we could unify, but the methodological approach based on science to show us how to do it in conflict, how to do it when we feel separate, how to do it when we disagree, how to do it when we feel the surge of violence in us, how to stop
Mm-hmm.
and shift the tide in ourselves and for ourselves, for the world. So that's the aspect of your 1111 unified vision that for me, when I saw it, I said, well, of course, yes, this is a fit.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, so many people these days are operating from the sympathetic nervous system, right? They're in fight or flight or freeze, and there's so much turmoil and chaos that's happening on an internal level. And how can we learn to come into that peaceful, calm place in the heart? And that would ripple out into that unified field. And I so love the work that HeartMath does, and Joe Dispenza and Nassim Haramein, really, really studying the science of the heart and how we are all interconnected, and on a quantum level, whether electromagnetically, biologically, frequency wise, we are all connected. And when we have that true realization, the old adage of do unto others as you would have them do unto you becomes even more real, because I am me and me are you and we are all one, right? And so I would love to find out a little bit more about some of your understanding of the science of the heart, Robert, and how you're integrating it into the healthcare system as well.
Well, I can first be the one that speaks as the non-clinician.
Sure.
I can give the folksy version, and Sheva can dive and get all the little nooks and crannies.
Perfect.
It is the fascinating part of the promise of the heart when we look at the heart, because you can look at it on all those levels. You can look at it from the biological level, and how is it actually beating, and what are the patterns of those heart rhythm patterns? How is it speeding up? How is it slowing down? And the science, in a really simple way, shows how when we're frustrated and fearful or angry or anything that seems quite depleting over time, the heart rhythms really look chaotic. The way that the two branches of the autonomic nervous system, both the sympathetic and parasympathetic, they're just out of sync. They're out of synchronization. But when you breathe in a particular way and you bring conscious intention there, and you start to infuse that heart-focused breathing with attitudes or feelings of appreciation or gratitude or compassion or love, whatever comes easy to you but authentic, really meaningfully felt, it brings synchronization and balance into those heart rhythm patterns, which has a whole cascade of effects, which Sheva can add. But anything you want to add to that piece?
Well, I think it's one of the things I love so much about HeartMath, and how inclusive the science itself is. So, Anistara, you even brought it forward, and not to like course correct you in the middle of our interview, but this is the common myth or misperception that the problem is the sympathetic nervous system and this fight, fight, or freeze. And if only we could just relax and calm down, then the world would have peace. And then the sympathetic nervous system gets demonized, and where's the unification? Then we have a world based on parasympathetic, and fight, flight, or freeze is the one that's ostracized and sent to the gas chambers. I mean, that's a terrible analogy. Forgive me for that. But it's the way that the paradigm of the current dimension of consciousness looks, which is, what's the problem? How do we cut out the problem so we have the solution? And that's the opposite of the unification. And this is what's so cool about HeartMath science. We don't need to get rid of the fight, flight, or freeze response, because it's the sympathetic nervous system is exquisite. Try having great sex without it.
It's there for a reason. Yes, of course.
Oh, yeah. Among many other wonderful things about life. If you think of it as our accelerator pedal, who wants a car that doesn't accelerate?
Exactly.
Its whole purpose is to go somewhere. what we want, if you think of that sympathetic nervous system as the accelerator pedal, then the parasympathetic as the brakes, we don't want to be all brakes any more than we are all accelerator.
Right.
In one, we're going to crash into a wall, and the other, we don't get anywhere. What we want is what I would call, this is Sheva talking, not HeartMath talking, right relationship. We want right relationship between that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. That's what actually the state of coherence physiologically is.
Yeah.
It's a little gas, a little brake, a little gas, a little brake. The heart speeds up a little, it slows down a little. I mean, we're reducing it because it can seem so mystical and mysterious, and it certainly has those elements to it. But if we want to get reductionist for a minute, it's just the fuel pedal and the brakes working in finesse, instead of like my uncle, who is no longer with us, used to drive with one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake. And then it's a herky-jerky ride that destroys our brake pads, ruins our transmission, burns through a lot of fuel, makes it the air stinky full of burnt rubber, and gets us nowhere. That's what stress is physiologically. And ironically, we can take the microcosm of that stress in our physiology and look at it globally or in interpersonal family relationships and say where we're operating out of sync with one another. It's like that dissonance in the autonomic nervous system. Where are we coming? Are we going? What we need to create unification at the internal level and at the international level is this coherence that really comes not from excising any part, but embracing the synergistic right relationship of all the parts working in a unison that synergizes diversity rather than demonizing what's different.
Right.
So let's take that as chapter 1 of the science and move into chapter 2 on this unification principle.
Yeah.
So when the autonomic nervous system has that unified response, that right relationship, that balance, the heart sends a signal up the vagus nerve that's communicating to the higher centers of the brain, the parts that help us function and strategically innovate and create.
Have this conversation in English.
Have this conversation. So our larger intelligence, or our intuition for that matter, things where there has been a disconnect, the kinds of insights or intuitive signals or just basic things that we've learned in life that could apply to help bring more harmony in our life, we're dismembered from accessing that in that chaotic response. But when it's coherent and the heart rhythms are coherent, it helps unify the heart and the mind and the brain. So it helps bring unification to this central part that even as individuals, and we're trying to create harmony in our life, right down to the food we eat or basic self-care or things we're wanting to create, having that intuitive flow, it all hinges on this unification at this level. And when you have multiple people together, either partnerships or teams or companies, all learning how to create
surgical team,
then that's when the more the harmony and system levels can happen.
So when Robert's referring to in terms of opening up that higher cortical function of the brain, there we have more situational awareness, more solution seeking, creative problem solving, goal setting, visionary action taking. Anistara, your whole 1111 vision had to be born out of that kind of inspired heart-brain unification and inspiration. And so when we talk to doctors and nurses, for example, now we're talking real energy efficiency. So prevention of burnout, reduction in medical error, increased capacity for efficacious diagnostics, like any measurement of effectiveness really comes from unifying the best parts of ourselves to work together as a functional whole.
Chapter 3.
Love that. Yes.
So on the individual level, and that kind of coherence is happening, the heart's also producing an electromagnetic field, which brings us to this event that you're producing in 1111. But what happens when you have one individual or multiple individuals all being more unified within, That field
and link up with each other.
up with each other. These electromagnetic fields can be measured with crude instrumentation built in 1902 by Dr. Einthoven. 3 feet, easily 3 feet from the body, but we know it goes way farther than that. And there's all these new models of science and nonlinearity, but it definitely travels. And you can measure these with magnetometers. It's measured in hertz.
Well, and it's worth saying that for an average physician or nurse working in a hospital anywhere, this isn't that great a mystery. Like anybody who runs an EKG knows when you hook electrodes up to the patient, you're not going to sit there and hold their hand while the monitors are running, because as a physician, if I hold his hand while I'm running an EKG, I know my heart is interfering with his. So we can explain in a very grounded, practical way to physicians, nurses, med techs, hospital workers, that these fields are interactive. And yet, if you ask any physician what would happen if they walked into a patient's room and started blowing cigarette smoke in their face,
No.
they would be fired instantaneously if they live in the US. But how often do we walk into a patient's room as healthcare workers bringing our stress with us? Or as parents into our child's room bringing our stress with us, or our spouse's room bringing our stress with us? It has impact. So through these simple techniques that HeartMath has created, we can take charge of that fuel pedal and brakes of our own physiology, gain access to our higher brain functions. So that was chapter 1 and chapter 2. In chapter 3, assume responsibility, which is the ability to respond to life and global events powerfully by deliberately choosing what we're feeding the energetic field.
Yes, indeed.
Or broadcast.
Yeah. Robert, did you have anything else you wanted to add to chapter 3?
It's just a bumper sticker. What are you feeding the field? I mean, I hold this question: what am I feeding the field day to day, moment to moment, not just in one moment of time? Because it's really powerful when a lot of people come together in an isolated moment of time because of the synergy of that. But sometimes we can think, well, that's it. That's great. We did our event. We all came together. But if we use that as a diving board to increase our self-awareness of what am I feeding the field tomorrow when I wake up, when I'm going to the restroom by myself, when I'm eating dinner with a friend, like what am I saying or what am I prepping for, but what am I really feeding the field? What am I feeling inside? How is that affecting the heart? And what is that broadcasting? And is that the world I'm wanting to contribute to in that way? So many of us spend so much time critiquing others of like, oh, look what I just saw in the news, or what are they doing? If we're saying, well, what they're putting in the field. But what about you? If we all took self-responsibility to what we're putting in the field, that momentum can have shocking upward movement into helping the planet. Others find that in their heart more easily, effortlessly, with more ease.
Love that. Thank you. And Sheva, thank you for the clarity. I'm a humble student of all of this, and HeartMath is relatively new to me. I've heard about them probably about 6 years ago. And so I'm just learning and I'm absorbing and I'm loving each and every conversation around it. And by no means do I want to demonize the sympathetic nervous system. My question is, what about the folks who constantly are living in stress and they're creating anxiety and depression in their body and eventually illness or disease? You know, our disease is such a result of constant stress or anxiety or depression or lack of sleep or just not enough self-care. And so I feel that there's so many in the world right now that are going through that. And what would be your advice on how to navigate those waters and how to have a coherence practice and come into coherence more often?
So much compassion. I mean, that, as I said earlier, that was me. And, you know, depression is the kind of breaks version of stress. where you're stuck with brakes and no accelerator pedal.
Okay.
So how do we really begin to engage that right-related activation of the autonomic nervous system and really ultimately the heart's power and intelligence when we are in a habitual pattern of those other feelings that you mentioned? And how do we do that authentically so it doesn't feel like we're denying what we really feel? It's what I say sometimes, putting chocolate icing on top of a rotting banana peel and serving it up and calling it dessert. Because HeartMath is not the suppression of uncomfortable emotion. So for me, as a person very much who was clinically diagnosed with those kinds of backgrounds, what I like to play with words. And I think it's very compelling that the word reactive and the word creative are the same letters rearranged. So all of us have what you could call a reactive system or reactive emotion. Something happens in our own lives or in world events that we feel reactive to, bad about, upset about, depressed or anxious about. In the case of anxiety, usually it's something we worry might happen. But we also have proactive emotion. And in fact, anxiety is a good example because we're generating emotion over something that might happen. And the fact that we have creative or proactive emotion, and that when we have an emotional shift toward what sometimes we call heart feelings at HeartMath, which simply means feelings or emotions that add regenerative fuel to our system as we would measure electromagnetically, hormonally, in terms of neurological changes, over 1,400 changes, immunological changes that boost our vitality rather than drain us. That's what a heart feeling is. Appreciation and gratitude are easy go-tos for a lot of people. Just the first thing you can find. In fact, we should probably do a little exercise with this in a moment.
Sure.
Not to shove other feelings down and sugarcoat them, but because every time we pick up the phone and say to someone, "You won't believe what happened to me today, Robert," or we say, "I'm afraid this, that, or that will happen," our body's suggestive, and whether it's happening or not, we go through the physiological changes as if it is. So we may as well harness that to our benefit and generate emotions on purpose that renew us, that protect us immunologically, that increase our self and situational awareness, our impulse control, our higher brain function, our creativity, and we could go on and on. So how about we harness some of that right now?
Sure. Yeah, let's do it.
Creatively
Love
instead
it.
of reactively.
And I'll add one texture since we're building this canvas and we're going to dive into it.
Yeah.
I think for those who are genuinely just struggling, like you're saying, I think in Sheva's first breath, when she brought in the word compassion, I think I just want to say to everyone, because I'm sure we all have that at different times, the qualities of a softness, if you will, like a certain ease, and compassion, and allowance, a love and allowance, really. Like, how could we not? This world is really tense right now. There's so much going on. And as with all that going on and what we know about electromagnetic fields, all of us could be we're swimming in a soup of chaos. And so to allow that latitude of how could we not be stressed at times? So to not feel alone in it, to not feel overly lost in it, which we can. But this technique will be a good diving board to just basically have a soft approach and allow ourselves to unfold another potential in us.
Thank you. Thank you for adding that.
Shall we dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So what we'll do with this is a 3-step process, really quick. But we'll pause at each step. because this will be relevant. So when you're doing heart meditations or for 1111 or for wherever you are and whenever you're listening to this, I think having the full 3 steps could be really beneficial to what we're feeding the field. But each step has intelligence to it. And why don't we just first experience the steps, and then we could, would that make sense? Or should we go through each one? Well, I'll briefly go through each one, and then we'll experience it together and we can unravel it more. But step 1 is this heart-focused breathing. So when we drop our attention to the area around the heart, let's just go ahead and do it, and then we'll unpack it. Just shift your attention to the area around the heart. And imagine that your breath is flowing in and out your heart or chest area a little deeper than usual. Just finding a rhythm that's comfortable for you. That's heart-focused breathing. And as you continue to breathe through the heart area, just make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care or compassion or love for someone or something in your life, something that comes easy to you. And breathe that feeling through the heart area. And gently radiate that feeling to yourself and to each other and to whomever intuitively comes to you that could use a little more heart right now, just to the whole world if you'd like. Just radiate that feeling through the heart area. And as you continue to radiate that feeling, just continue to stay focused in the heart area while I speak a little bit about each step and why it's relevant, a little bit of the intelligence of each step. But continue playing with this, staying aware of your heart, what you're feeding the field, what you're radiating, while we just enter this piece of the discussion. But in that first step, that heart-focused breathing, if that's all you can get to, that's plenty. Because as you breathe in, your heart rate accelerates, and as you breathe out, it decelerates. It helps bring our heart rhythm patterns into coherence. And when we're working with trauma or PTSD, sometimes getting into a renewing emotion is very challenging. So just the breath alone helps. So step 1 alone is huge progress. But your nervous system starts to feel like, hey, this feels nice. and that signal starts to shift up the vagus nerve, and it gives us a leveraged chance to start to infuse that step with a renewing emotion. So that's step 2 of then breathing a heart feeling through the area around the heart helps bring stability, integration, and anchoring of that state, if you will. And it starts to bring that stability, that unification of all parts of the body, and add more balance, more stability there. And so then we can begin to engage. If you can get to step 2, that feeling starts to carry the breath for you. I'm having more compassion in this moment, more care in this moment, more appreciation, and I'm bringing that into my conversations or into my meetings. That's called quick coherence, those 2 steps. If you get those 2 steps, wow, that's powerful. Hey, but if you have a little more time, or you're in a meditation and you have 3 minutes here or 4 or 5 minutes here, just sit in that and radiate that. That's the step 3, is radiate that. This is called a heart lock-in, this whole technique. And you radiate that to yourself and each other, and that really helps the nervous system find a new baseline and get familiar with something that's been unfamiliar for really long. And if we do that maybe 3 or 5 times a week, 3 to 5 minutes during those times, we can really start to create a new normal. And that helps us sleep, and that helps us be more on top of or aware when the stress is overriding us and we want to inject the new natural of who we truly are. And it gives us more of a leveraged chance to do so.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. It's a beautiful explanation. Thank you. I had the honor of recently going through the AdHeart Facilitator training program with HeartMath, and I'd like to continue with the resilience program. And I feel like I'll have more spaciousness for that come January next year. So looking forward to that. And what a beautiful way to offer to people the heart lock-in technique, because it is something we will be sharing with Howard Martin very, very soon. And we will be having our global coherence moment during the day. So at 5 to 5:30, Howard Martin will be leading us through a heart lock-in technique. So we'll have our global synchronized moment together. We're just calling it the Global Heart Coherence Experience. So thank you for that. Yeah, it was a great explanation.
Anistara, have you let the cat out of the bag that you're going to be eyeing the random number generators on the global coherence?
No, I haven't. And would you like to share, Sheva? Yeah, please.
So this concept Robert brought forward in the lock-in of literally radiating, like you just heard our heater go on, that's radiating heat. So when enough people are focused in generating this kind of coherence, there are some good indicators that it not only changes our own health and vitality or the performance of teams in like a healthcare setting or in conflict zones where we do some work with the United Nations or in turning the dial on global issues because of the capacity for solution seeking, which is more what we do at our HeartAmbassador program. But it also seems to influence geomagnetic activity. And the Global Coherence Initiative at the HeartMath Institute was created to measure that possibility and hypothesis. And so they're measuring it because the Earth is not unlike your heart broadcasts this electromagnetic field, just like your cell phone does, anything electrical in nature or magnetic in nature. Well, the Earth essentially has an iron core magnet in its center, and it has a very strong electromagnetic field around it. And that field is interacting with electromagnetic field coming from the sun and encountering one another in these areas around the planet we call Schumann resonances. And so these things also affect global weather patterns and other possible things like earthquakes, and that solar activity also affects violent conflict. Hospital admissions, innovativeness, and inventiveness. So at the Global Coherence Initiative, we're looking at, so what decides when there's increased geomagnetic activity coming, let's say increased solar activity from a solar storm on the sun? What decides whether that launches a war or the invention of the steam engine? Well, we would hypothesize it's us. Are we going to take that added energy and become agitated and, to your point, Anistara, depressed or anxious with it? Or are we going to harness that to generate coherence and activate new ideas, creative possibilities, and vision 11/11 events? And when we come together in focused attention with intention on the love and heart qualities like compassion, care, appreciation. Now we're measuring how that impacts the Earth's electromagnetic field. There are sensor sites that HeartMath Institute has put around the world. Maybe Howard will talk a little bit more about that later. But there's also random number generators that originally were being monitored by Princeton that they discovered on days like the International Day of Peace, where you have whole populations focused on something like peace, that those random number generators stop being random. So when we're gathered today with you, I think you said between 5 and 5:30, all focusing in the heart, led by Howard. We're going to keep an eye on those random number generators just to see how is our unity feeding the field, impacting the field. There can be some feedback loops, and we have feedback. This is, at the individual level, you can see your heart rhythms in real time with this little gizmo from HeartMath.
Yes.
The random number generators are becoming a way. How can we palpate or receive some feedback of our collective arm in arm, heart to heart, linked in care for the planet? I love your enthusiasm for this, Anistara.
I just love it. I so love it. I mean, Teresa Collins from the Global Coherence Pulse, she's also part of our unprogramming, and that's her mission really in life too, is just to create these moments where we come together on a global level, and there's people all around the world going through a coherence experience together. And so I'm just fascinated by this. I've always wondered what happens on the planet on 11/11 at 11/11, because there's many of us that are 11/11ers, we like to say. And so because so much of the 11/11 codex is anchored in unification, I'm curious what happens on an energetic level on the planet during that time. So I'm just so excited that we're going to be able to keep an eye on this during the event.
One fun thing, I'm just having a thought, is
yes, please.
There's this story I used to love about, like, the genie in the lamp, and you get one wish. And I always wondered, well, what would be the greatest wish? And the one I used to always love was when they would say, oh, I'm wishing for more wishes. So one of the things I would love is on 11/11, wherever y'all are at, in the field, create the intention of, oh, it's 11/11 all the time. Just make that part of the creation.
Well, so that's,
it happens twice a day, right? So you can acknowledge it at least twice a day. What is that, Sheva?
You'd asked earlier, how could we encourage someone who's feeling anxious, depressed, despairing to, in higher ratios, live from more coherence, from more creative capacity. And so the quick coherence technique that we taught is kind of like the 11/11 moment. And you take enough of those moments and string them together, and you get a whole string of pearl moments that create over a longer period of time a more heart-based life. And knowing that this interview with you is like one of those moments, we wanted to offer the string to pearl some moments together, and that's why we gave your audience the Shift to the Heart course in HeartMastery.
Yes. Can you share a little bit about that? Because we're gonna, today's the day we're sharing it with all of you. Sheva, can you let them know what it is that they're able to receive?
I'm getting such a strong heart impulse to say something that relates to it indirectly, which is,
of course,
to ground the conversation a little bit and say, and I don't know if this is true for any of you out there watching this. It was certainly true for me, because I had the idealism of unification. And so then it's like, okay, well, how do I unify or honor my inherent unity with someone who's abusing me? Someone who's verbally or physically abusive with me or dangerous to me. And so I really want to ground the conversation we're having by sharing that these tools helped me with that. That it wasn't just about idealistically sending love and then being treated like a doormat. That in fact, in being a stand in my own dignity, and creating safe space from mistreatment, that I can find the right orientation, just like we need space between the fuel pedal and the brakes, doing them both is chaotic. Space with behaviors that deny our oneness allows me to be in a place of loving compassion without being damaged by that. I'm so present to that. I had to say it. And so
thank you for speaking to that.
We can't cover the complexity of unity within disunity in an hour or 40 minutes or whatever this is, which is why we're offering all of you a deeper dive into the HeartMath skills. If your heart resonates with this science and these practices through our HeartMath HeartMastery program, and a gift of the shift to the heart, which is what the first course in HeartMastery is called, which is 5 webinars with a tool in each one. Howard, who you'll meet later, and I are co-teachers in the course. And the science behind them, and also how that science and those tools are related to the global shift that's happening. As well as daily practice calls called Heart Start to Your Day, where you can join with the global community for one of those pearl moments, well, 30 of them actually, because they're 30-minute calls, to start your day in the heart, or if you're in Europe, to end your day in the heart, or listen to them whenever you want, to practice the skills with the global community so that you can string many of these moments you're getting today on 11/11 together moving forward. To Robert's point, it can be 11/11 in every moment and 11/11 every day, or Peace Day every day, or at least in higher ratios. So there's a coupon that you'll find somewhere on all these pages. Anistara, I know your team will make it beautiful and brilliantly obvious. If you want to join us in those, the webinars are self-paced, but there's also group coaching discussion groups that the 11/11 Unified community will have as a cohort going through to discuss those experiences and what you're learning, and to troubleshoot challenges. Like for me, when I'm kidnapped at gunpoint, how do I find unity with my kidnapper? Like that was a real experience I had. And I can tell you these tools work in those tough dynamics. This is not just idealism. These are not just soft skills, or if they are, they're the ones I want in the hardest times. They're the heart skills for hard times. Because I am unified with my kidnapper, but I don't have to endure the abuse of that behavior and sacrifice my dignity for unity. I get to stand in my heart of human dignity, and that is a stand for the dignified unity of us all in our highest potential.
Beautiful.
Thank
you for sharing. Thank you for your vulnerable, authentic shares too, and really just like grounding in that this works.
This shit works, and it works the grit of life. Because if we want real unity, the grit has got to be included, and we have to find a way to be with it effectively. And the heart has shown me that. Well, and HeartMath, and I mean, look at what I get to be with now.
Oh, so sweet. I love it. Oh,
there's hope.
There's totally hope. So you two, I know that we can just talk for hours, I'm sure. And
we will,
I want
the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
This is just the beginning. Yes, of course it is. And I want our viewers to find out a little bit more about the work that you're specifically doing with HeartMath Healthcare and HeartAmbassadors. Can you share a little bit about those?
You want to start?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing that what's so beautiful about the heart in these tools is that it can speak to really anyone wherever they're at, whether to whatever educational level, whatever demographic, whatever profession, because everyone has a heart. And Sheva and I have definitely had the beautiful opportunity to take this message into the healthcare professions and our hospitals and our so many who've been, I mean, the past year and a half of being on those front lines with COVID and the whole arcs and journeys that they've had to go through, from being heroes to non-heroes to man, all these things. I mean, but at the heart and soul of all of it, they're there to serve and to help someone heal. And so to allow these tools to help care for these caregivers of ours has been a real sacred honor. And the fact that there's so much evidence-based science and it's grounded in real practicality, it can speak to all levels and listenings, whether someone's into doing a global meditation or they're just into lowering their blood pressure or just surviving or just something to give a patient or a distressed family member, because they're so nimble. That little technique we did today, even if you piece it apart and just have one step or two, if someone's in distress and you have the heart of your heart to share quick coherence with them, it's such a gift. And so it's been great, and it allows for the fuels and the engines of all the research that helps give it more grounding stability for those who need that to listen to this message. So you want to add to that?
I mean, on the hospital front, I would say, for me, frontline healthcare workers in this pandemic have been truly heroic and human. And that this tool has saved lives and jobs for people who are burned out, exhausted, exasperated. One of the exciting domains we're working in HeartMath Healthcare is the VA hospital system in the United States with our veteran population, and radical transformations of PTSD as measured within the VA's metric system for PTSD diagnostics in a ridiculously short amount of time. One of our VA practitioners just worked with a commander who had transitioned from the military with a real red flag warning for PTSD that warranted hospital admission, and he refused. He didn't want the stigma. So she did only 6 weeks of HeartMath interventions with him, and he went from a red flag inpatient identification or marker for PTSD down to undiagnosable as PTSD on the same survey 6 weeks later. So again, even when we're talking about unification in PTSD being the fragmentation of our past experience and our current life, and how do we reconcile that? The ability to integrate trauma and move from post-traumatic stress to post-traumatic growth is embedded in heart intelligence and heart power, and can be accessed without stomping in the swamp of rehashing the story of trauma and stigmatizing ourselves with debilitating diagnoses. So that's an area of our work in hospitals that I'm most excited and passionate about.
Incredible. Thank you. Wow. How can people find out more about that? Is that on the HeartMath website, heartmath.com?
Yeah.
HeartMath.com. I could talk. There it is.
Yeah, on the hospital. Yeah, on the hospital. You go there, and also that talks about healthcare. Sheva and I are there as far as co-directors for healthcare.
And also anyone can write to our healthcare team at de-stress, DESTRESS, de-stress at heartmath.com with inquiries, and we can send more specific information if you know. And it's a DESTRESS, de-stress.
Go get it. Thank you, Brielle.
Yeah, that's magical.
Yes. There you go.
Voila.
Sheva and I will both see that along with our team.
It comes to us and our team. So if you have questions about our work in healthcare or how it might be relevant to healthcare workers or patients, we're happy to respond.
Wonderful. Thank you. And do you work with private health associations as well? Private member associations?
Absolutely.
Or is it mainly like Kaiser and bigger Western medicine corporations?
Both. All
fabulous. Yes. Well, we'll certainly be talking soon about that then as well. And what about Heart Ambassadors? Share just a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Well, one of the things that happened for me when I came up here as a young graduate student transcribing research is that I discovered when you transform your own stress, suddenly your heart is available with compassion for a world in distress.
Mm-hmm.
And all you want to do, your thankfulness fills up so much in that healing that it wants to spill over into a thanksgiving. You want to help. You want to give back. That's what happened to me. And so out of that, a natural extension of completing the HeartMastery program that all of you are receiving the first course to as a gift is how can I help the world?
Mm-hmm.
And so Heart Ambassadors became a vehicle for that. And we take applied heart intelligence with HeartMath skills as one of our core modalities and tenets. There's also 4 other frameworks that we work with, including the 8 pathways to peace and the 17 sustainable development goals from the UN, and look at, since this shit works in the grittiest of the grit of human and global experience, how do we take the power of the heart to heal issues like sex trafficking of girls, poverty and hunger, climate change, and international and national violent conflict, domestic violence? How do we bring the heart and its light into the darkest places on our planet? And that's the game we play at Heart Ambassadors. And you can see a lot of our projects at Fyera.org, Fyera.org, where we take the heart's power and apply it to disaster relief, for example. So we're official partners with the Red Cross, and we bring HeartMath skills into post conflict zones, into conflict mitigation, into hurricane disaster relief, earthquake disaster relief, wildfire disaster relief. So anyone who's interested in learning more about Heart Ambassadors can actually, on the website, just sign up for a complimentary consultation and meet with one of our HeartMath trained professionals to find out if your heart is called in that direction.
Wow. I am just floored by your beauty and your grace and all that you two offer the world. Thank you so very much for your loving devotion to bridging people around the world through their hearts. I just so appreciate you. Thank you.
Well, I figure that right back to you, Anistara, because that's why we're here, is you are a mirror of that. That is what you are doing with your 1111 unified vision. And
I'm so happy that you heard that and saw the vision and heard the vision and felt the call. And so I really appreciate that. We're all here to do it together, right? We are co-creating coherence. It is not a one-person job.
It's not uni-coherence, even though it unifies us.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Sheva. Any final words before we close out?
No, just be kind to yourself and to each other. And love is more powerful than we know. And the heart can be our friend through the whole process. So.
I would say
such a blessing. Have a beautiful day. Happy 11/11 to you.
Yes. Thank you, Anistara.
Take care. We'll see you really soon.